Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and with weaning sales taking place across the country, I'm joined by Aidan Murray, Teagasc Beef specialist, to discuss a number of the finishing budgets. Aidan, no two farms are the same. What should farmers consider when completing their own farm beef finishing budget?
Well, that's very true, Catherine, in terms of how farms are set up and the scales that they operate. Look, if they're going into a winter finishing, I suppose, you have to look at what your costs are going to be in terms of, talking to farmers that are finishing on a larger scale. They're probably 30 or 40 euros a tonne more competitive with their meal costs. If you're operating maybe on the basis of using good quality silage, or if your silage is poorer quality, get it tested, because it could mean the difference of maybe a lower cost silage plus meal system versus an ad lib meal system, particularly when meal has got so expensive this year. And then look at the type of stock, I suppose, that you're buying, and what is the market outlook. It's okay paying a big price for a store or a weanling in this stage, but if it's going to be 18 months before that animal is ready, well then, what's the indications going to be like with regard to where the market's going to be? The short-term view with regard to market is that, we're going to be back on our overall slaughtering figures this year to about 1.67, 1.68 million, which is back from the 1.8 million that we slaughtered in 2020. And again, there's no huge increase in cattle numbers predicted to come on stream in 2022. But then, there's people out there buying weanlings at this stage that will not be ready to 2023. And, the market could be, the price could be considerably back on where it is today for those type of animals. Certainly, is it long keep, short keep, and keep an eye on what the market is saying.
Aidan, every year Teagasc produce a set of beef budgets that deal with a number of finishing scenarios. The prices for weanlings are good this autumn. How are store and weanlings prices compared to previous years?
Well, I would have been doing the budget since 2013, and the highlight year for all store and weanling prices was 2015 up until this year. And what we actually see across the board is that, compared to last year, first of all, if I look across all the categories, and we would be going from, 5 to 600 kilo steers right down to 280 kilo weanling heifers, and there's probably about 15 different animal categories across what we look at year on year. And compared to 2020, the overall across all those categories is up about 7%. Now, if you take the top end of 5 to 600 kilo bullocks, they're probably up 10%. Overall, the 4 to 500 kilo bull weanlings, they're up about 12%. And that, so, we're seeing an increase across the board. And then if we look at where the price is in 2021 relative to the store prices of the high in 2015, we're up just about 0.2% on that. And that's the first year that we've actually exceeded the 2016 or 2015 figure. Like last year, for example, the store and weanling prices were on average about 6% behind what it was in 2015. In 2019, which was a turbulent enough year, they were 16% behind. So we've seen a very real increase and a very welcome increase in store and weanling prices for the people that are producing them.
Most definitely a welcome increase. But for the purposes of the budgets that you're analysing, what are the assumed costs?
Well, the few assumed things is, I suppose, look, we put in silage at costed a good quality silage costed at 30 euros a tonne. Our meal cost has taken a significant jump this year on foot of what people are actually paying. We're seeing some operators that are buying large scale possibly being able to feed at 270, 280 a tonne, and smaller operators then could be paying up to 320. So we've pitched the meal price this year for the various systems at 300 euros a tonne, and that's up from 240 last year. So it's about 60 euro a tonne up on what we had in the budgets last year. We also factor in the purchase price of the animal and interest, half the value of the animal and interest and the interest rate there is about 7%. And then we've got fixed costs, which will vary very much from farm to farm, depending on what stage the farm is at in terms of development and that. But equally, how long the animal is going to stay on the farm, and what the stocking rate that farm might carry for those categories of animals. So, the fixed costs could range, on some of the bull systems for a short keep from maybe €115 up to €160, depending on where the length of time that the animal's on the farm. And equally then, if you look at the sort of weanling to beef systems, the weanling steer over for the 18 odd months that he's on the farm will be about €238, whereas the weanling heifer that would be gone next November, December, about €168. So it varies according to system, and obviously sort of stocking rate and the time on the farm.
And you highlighted there that there are a number of systems, Aidan, from the shorter keep systems and the bull beef systems, and probably the longer autumn to autumn or weanling to beef systems. For the winter finishing budget, can you talk me through it? What are the outlooks looking like?
Yeah, well, we do a three-way winter finishing steer budget as such, and what we look at is we look at sort of a Frisian animal coming in at 500 kilos, a Hereford cross at 500 kilos, or a Continental cross at 530 kilos, and it's all based. These diets are all based on a very good quality silage plus 4 to 4.5, 5 kilos of concentrate going in on the system. And so you're getting a gain from about 0.9 to about a kilo a day. Other lads might prefer to have an ad-lib system where they'll take those steers and ad-lib them for maybe 80 days, which is a different scenario and obviously will vary from farm to farm. But that animal, we would be looking to keep the animal, the Frisian, until he's about 620, 630 kilos live weight. The same, similarly for the Hereford cross, and about 670 kilo live weight for the Continental. And that gives us then a range from a 326 kilo carcass in the Frisian up to a 375 kilo carcass in the Continental cross. And based on the figures this year, that 500 kilo Frisian steer, which would be seen to be all these animals would be sort of short keep as such, they're coming in this year at about 197 a kilo. The Hereford's at 226 and a Continental cross at about 255. So you have a purchase price there ranging from about 985 for the Frisian right up to 1352 for the Continental cross. When you factor in the costs, and the costs are typically sort of 475 to 485 depending on the system, you're talking about needing a selling price to break even of 1459 for the Frisian, 1606 for the Hereford cross, and about 1837 for the Continental. So that basically means, and it's a bit frightening in a way, that the break-even selling price is 448 for your Frisian, 484 for your Hereford, and 490 for your Continental cross next spring. And if you can buy them 10 cent a kilo cheaper than that, it'll take about 10 cent off the break-even price when it comes to sale time. So if I could buy my Frisian at 187 as opposed to 197, I would my break-even price would move from 448 back to about 430, 432, 433. So there's about 16 cent of a difference there in terms of the 10 cent that you save at purchase time.
And that's only a break-even price. There's no margin included in that.
They're just a break even, and if you wanted to put a €50 margin, and that's a very small margin given the amount of money that's invested in the risk, but you're probably talking somewhere in the region of 12 to 14 cent on top of that break even price in order to give yourself that small margin. Now, obviously, if you can improve your efficiencies in terms of average daily gain, or you can buy your meal a bit cheaper, that's obviously going to help. And that, but I mean, on this budget, €50 margin on top of that Continental cross, you're talking essentially €5 a kilo, or slightly with it in order to get that €50. So it's a huge gamble in terms of hoping that in the springtime of the year that you're able to command that type of price for those animals. And it's very hard to get anybody to put their neck on the line and say, yes, that's what we'll be given for beef next spring.
The weanling to finish in budget takes a 280 kilo heifer and a 300 kilo weanling steer through to finish at 20 or 24 months. What do the budgets show?
Well, those budgets, basically, these are a long keep animal. So essentially, you're taking the weanling that's coming in today at 7 months or whatever to it's 24 months on the steer side and 20 months heifer that's coming in. And we're buying the bullock or the steer at 300 kilos and the heifer at 280 with a view to trying to get them to 685 for the steer live weight and 550 live weight for the heifer, which would give us a carcass weight on the steer of 377 kilos and 296 kilos on the heifer. So the big thing here is the jump in purchase price. Like that 300 kilo from other years, that 300 kilo weanling coming in at the moment is 294 a kilo, and the heifer's 307. And those prices have actually probably strengthened as we looked over the summer in terms of what those animals were costing. So your bullock coming in is costing about 882, and the heifer 860. And when you factor in costs and that, now the heifer system is a typical grange, and the steer is a typical grange type system, but the heifer would essentially be overwintered on about a kilo of meal on good quality silage over the winter time, put out to grass, grazed right the way through, and then fed at grass about 3 kilos for about 60 days before they go to slaughter. And the idea would be to try and get them away essentially off grass. Some people may have to house, but they're around about that October, November time of 2022. That animal would incur total cost between variable and fixed of about almost €500, 495. Your steer price, the cost there, because you actually have to carry that animal through a second winter, and it's carried very similarly to the heifer through the first winter with about a kilo of concentrate on good quality silage, and then the second winter it goes in on good silage and it's getting sort of 4.5 to 5 kilos over the entire finishing period. That bumps the cost of that system up to about total costs up to about 869. So your break-even price for that steer that'll be coming out in the spring of 2023 is 1751, and your heifer of 1355, meaning that next November, December, we need a break-even price on the heifer of 457, and at the spring of 23, 464 for the steer. Now, to me, that's probably a much bigger gamble in that you're trying to predict 18 months out as to what beef price, and you're predicting a strong beef price to break even on those animals.
Last year, Aidan, we've seen that the autumn to autumn system appeared to be the most attainable in terms of a margin. What does it indicate this year?
Yeah, this system is probably the most extensive system that we look at year on year, because it's basically good quality silage and grass and killing off grass in the autumn. So essentially what we look at is buying a 350 kilo Friesian, a 350 kilo Hereford cross, and a 430 kilo Continental cross coming in. And we look to bring the Friesian to 309 kilos carcass, 315 for the Hereford cross, and 375 for the Continental cross. Again, the looking at the purchase prices range there from about based on the Martwatch figures of about 170 a kilo for that 350 kilo Friesian steer, right up to 261 for the Continental cross, and that leaves you a purchase price of 595 for the Friesian, 749 for the Hereford, and 1122 for the Continental. When you factor in the cost, and this system is not affected by meal price, because essentially, other than you decide to put meal in the system at the very end, which is probably only for 40 or 50 days, and that'll be an additional cost. Your total costs in this system, are from about 460 to about 480 euros. So your break-even price is much lower, in that you'll need about 1,053 for your Friesian, 1212 for your Hereford, and 1595 for your continental. So your break-even price, that means then that for your Frisian animal next autumn, you'd be looking for 340, 384 for your Hereford cross, and 426 for your continental. So it's lower risk in that, because you're able to have a much cheaper grass-based system, that you're not exposing yourself to the fluctuations in meal price, and there's no heavy meal there's no meal feeding in the system as such. So you're giving yourself possibly the best opportunity to attain a break-even price. And when you look at 340, 384 for the Frisian and the Hereford, you would have to think that next autumn that would be very attainable, and hopefully we would get to maybe the 426 for the continental. But obviously it's a sort of a bigger gamble there again. But year on year, because of the low inputs and because it's basically a grass-based, forage-based system, that always delivers the lowest break-even price, and it's a nice enough system for certain individuals if they're able to buy correctly.
And finally, Aidan, there are pros and cons to the bull beef system. What are the bull beef budgets highlighting this year?
Well, basically on the bull beef, the big one probably with the bulls is that those heavier animals accordingly per kilo are dearer to buy. And we look at 3 different systems. We look at a 320 kilo silage and meal, which again is a grange type system. 320 kilo animal coming in, and it's a concentrate and good quality silage. Then we look at a 6-month finishing period of a heavier 420 kilo bull coming in, that would give us about a 385 kilo carcass. Or then we look at a heavier bull that's fed on ad lib concentrate again, but fed for a longer period, to give us up to a 725 kilo live weight or a 420 kilo carcass. And look, the big one with the bulls is, we know they're hugely efficient. They can put on, the ad lib systems, anything from 1.5 kilos to maybe for periods during the ad lib over 2 kilos a day. Their kill out is better. They'll go up in terms of their carcass conformation grade by maybe a half a score to a score over and above your steer, and they tend to be leaner. The problem with it is they will consume, 10, 11, 12 kilos of concentrate per day on an ad lib system. It's a much more disciplined way of feeding, and you can get more stomach upsets on that high concentrate feeding of those type of animals. And the other issue is you've got 2 issues with the bulls. You've got the age issue. Can you bring them in under 16 months? And if they are, that's great. They're attractive to a lot of plants. But if you're not going to take them in under 16 months and they go over 16 months, you've got the issue of they'll be less attractive to some plants. And the other point is you possibly have a weight issue in terms of going up way above 420 kilos in terms of carcass weight, which again, I suppose, look, the talk at the moment, or up to this point, has been that weight hasn't been too much of an issue with regards to any types of carcasses, particularly on the heavy side, because of the demand that's out there and the fact that supply is below probably what's required. So that's not as big an issue, but it's something you need to be very, very careful with on the bull system. The other point is, look, that 320 kilo animal coming in is 294 a kilo. The heavier 420 kilo, about 281 a kilo coming in. And the break-even prices for those animals then ranges from 16 for the lighter animal coming in, meaning that you need a break-even price next spring of 467, right up to those heavier animals that are on the ad lib meals. And the budgets will show that you need anything from 510 to 530 a kilo for some of those systems. Again, that's a huge break-even price. I don't think, and on all the budgets that I've done, that I've ever had a break-even price that high.
Yeah, very high break-even price, Aidan. Finally, what are the key considerations for farmers that are selling weanlings in the coming weeks?
Well, I suppose the big issues is that, across all the categories of weanlings, and certainly lots of weanling sellers that I've been speaking to in the last few weeks are very pleased with what they're actually getting. People that would normally keep weanlings, they would ask themselves the question, should I keep them this winter, given the fact that meal price is up, or would I be better off to sell them? So there's maybe tax considerations to take into consideration there if you offload more stock this year and have and don't sell in the springtime. The other thing about it is, one of the worrying things that I have seen is that there's lots of calves, weanlings being just taken straight off the cow and arrived at the mart. And that's might be fine for the person selling, but it's not good business for the person buying, because the weanings, the stress of weaning, the change of environment, now the fact that the weather has actually got quite wet and ground conditions, certainly in the northwest here, have got sticky. A lot of those weanlings will leave the mart and go straight into a shed, as opposed to maybe being put back outside again, and that increases the pressure of the sort of the breakdown. And there's a responsibility there for weanling sellers to make sure that their calves are in good fit condition, that they've been well wormed, well dosed, and don't be selling on a potential problem to a buyer. They're getting premium price for the product this year, and they just need to keep an eye on that they're doing the job as best they can and giving them in as good a condition and as healthy as they can to the person that's going to buy them. I suppose the other consideration this year is that there's lots of people trying to get under the 5% or get the 5% reduction under beam. So, it might be worthwhile taking a look at whether weanlings should be sold on or stores that maybe some people would normally keep, and you would sort of qualify for the beam and cash in on the sort of the good prices that's there at the moment. So it's certainly worthwhile trying to do a budget and factor in where you're at if you've claimed beam, because that's causing a lot of problems for people out there at the moment.
That's great, Aidan. Thanks very much for such an insight into the beef budgets.
Thanks, Catherine.
That's all for this week's episode, and my thanks to Aidan for joining me on the show. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.